Looking at the current situation, it is evident that the Iranian Navy may have suffered heavy losses. However, the issue of greatest global concern right now is not how many warships they have lost, but rather what Tehran can do next at sea. Is there still a trump card that Iran has yet to play? The intense US airstrikes in the early days of the campaign destroyed many Iranian warships, demonstrating Washington's overwhelming superiority in firepower and military technology. Nevertheless, many military analysts argue that modern conflicts are rarely decided solely by initial losses. While the US declaration of a major blow to the Iranian Navy carries clear tactical significance, it does not mean Tehran has exhausted its capacity to exert pressure in the region. In strategic assessments, observers note that Iran has long prepared for a confrontation scenario with a militarily superior opponent. Instead of seeking direct competition, Tehran's military doctrine focuses on asymmetric warfare methods, exerting pressure on vital maritime routes, leveraging coastal terrain, and disrupting international trade. The heart of this strategy lies in the Strait of Hormuz, the world's most critical energy transit point. On the other hand, the question lies not only in military capability, but also in the resources required to sustain the campaign. Some experts believe that overwhelming superiority allows the US to gain the advantage in initial strikes, but the cost of a prolonged military campaign, from deploying forces and maintaining fleets to ensuring maritime safety, could rapidly escalate. In this context, the confrontation is not just a story of military might, but also a test of both sides' ability to pursue a long-term war. The damage sustained by the Iranian Navy in the early days of hostilities is clear. Many warships were destroyed, several coastal bases were attacked, and the traditional surface fleet suffered significant losses. In the balance of forces with the US, this is not a surprise. The US Navy has long maintained overwhelming superiority in technology, sensor systems, and long-range combat capabilities. In a direct face-off at sea, the outcome typically favors the force with superior firepower and air control. However, a perspective limited only to the number of destroyed ships can easily lead to a hasty assessment. For years, Iran's military structure has been built not to win a traditional naval battle, but to draw the opponent into a more complex and difficult-to-control confrontation. This is also why Tehran's naval forces are organized into two relatively independent branches: the Islamic Republic of Iran Navy, IRIN, and the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, IRGCN. The IRIN plays the role of a traditional navy, operating frigates, submarines, and corvettes to maintain a maritime presence. This force suffered the most damage during the airstrikes. Conversely, the IRGCN is built on a completely different logic: asymmetric warfare. Instead of competing directly with large fleets, this force focuses on small, mobile, and stealthy assets. Hundreds of fast attack crafts can move quickly in coastal waters, combined with unmanned surface vehicles, USVs, to create swarm attacks. In strategic calculations, these seemingly small assets play a vital role. An attack by fast boats or USVs does not necessarily need to sink an enemy warship. Merely disrupting maritime traffic, forcing commercial vessels to reroute, or causing insurance companies to hike shipping rates can cause economic impacts to spread very quickly. This is how a weaker force can create pressure far beyond its military scale. Additionally, Iran still possesses a familiar deterrent: naval mines. For decades, Tehran has invested in stockpiles of these weapons because of their low production cost but high strategic effectiveness. The appearance of even a few mines on a key shipping lane can bring transport activities to a standstill for days. The process of detecting and clearing mines is always slow and costly, especially in high-traffic areas. All these factors converge at one pivotal point: the Strait of Hormuz. This is the world's most important energy transit route, where dozens of oil tankers pass every day. Iran does not need to fully control this area to exert pressure. By simply creating a permanent sense of risk for maritime activities, Tehran can cause the global energy market to react strongly. Oil prices, shipping insurance fees, and transport costs can all fluctuate after just one minor incident on this route. Therefore, many analysts believe that the initial losses of the Iranian Navy are not yet the end of its capacity to exert pressure at sea. Tehran may not gain the upper hand in a traditional naval battle, but they still possess enough tools to disrupt the global trade system. In a context where the world economy relies heavily on the flow of energy through the Persian Gulf, the mere ability to cause instability is a significant lever. On the flip side, the US strikes also raise another question. How high will the price of this campaign be if the conflict drags on? Large-scale military campaigns always come with massive costs, and early figures show a significant level of expenditure. In just the first few days, the volume of high-precision weaponry used cost billions of dollars. Every cruise missile and every airstrike entails operational, logistical, and maintenance costs. Furthermore, there is the cost of maintaining a military presence halfway around the world. Deploying carrier strike groups, bombers, and missile defense systems requires a massive logistical chain. Fuel, ammunition, spare parts, and personnel must be continuously transported to the Middle East. The cost of operating a single aircraft carrier for one day alone runs into millions of dollars. War, therefore, does not only consume money on the battlefield. The economic impact extends far beyond the conflict zone. Every time tensions escalate near the Strait of Hormuz, the global energy market reacts immediately. Oil prices tend to rise, leading to increased transport costs, fuel prices, and inflationary pressure in many economies. For the US, these fluctuations are not just economic issues, but also political challenges. Rapidly rising gasoline prices can directly impact people's lives and become a subject of fierce domestic political debate. As a military campaign drags on, budget pressure and public pressure typically increase accordingly. In this context, the cost of war sometimes becomes part of the strategy. Iran understands that it is unlikely to defeat the US through pure military power. But if the conflict lasts long enough to increase the economic and political costs for Washington, the balance of calculation may gradually shift. In other words, in a prolonged confrontation, money and time sometimes become factors as important as weaponry. These factors are gradually shaping the true nature of the confrontation. This may not be a quickly decided war, but a prolonged war of attrition. In this type of conflict, the critical question is not just which side is stronger, but which side can endure longer. In purely military terms, US superiority is almost unquestionable. The US Navy possesses a vast network of bases, carrier strike groups, and high-precision weapon systems that can strike targets from great distances. In direct clashes at sea or in the air, technological advantage and combat coordination give the US a clear edge. However, that very superiority comes at a great price. Every large-scale deployment consumes enormous resources, from operating warships and aircraft to providing logistics for tens of thousands of soldiers. As the campaign lengthens, these expenses quickly accumulate into a significant budgetary burden. Additionally, military decisions are influenced by the domestic political environment, where the cost of war often becomes a heated topic of debate. On the opposing side, Iran's approach is entirely different. Tehran has long understood that it can hardly compete directly with the US in military scale. Instead of investing in a large fleet or expensive weapon systems, Iran chooses an asymmetric strategy: cheaper, more flexible assets that can disrupt the battlefield without needing direct confrontation. The cost of maintaining this strategy is much lower than operating a global-scale military force. In a war of attrition, the disparity in cost is sometimes as important as the disparity in firepower. One side must maintain a widespread military network and protect international shipping lanes, while the other side only needs to create enough instability to force the opponent to keep spending money and extending their military presence. As time passes, these daily recurring expenses can become the factor that changes strategic calculations. Thus, many analysts believe that Tehran's goal may not be to defeat the US in the traditional sense. All Iran needs to do is prolong the conflict long enough and maintain pressure on trade routes, especially at the Strait of Hormuz, where the world's energy flow passes daily. As long as this region frequently falls into a state of tension, the economic impact can spread beyond the scope of the battlefield. The final question remains open. Will the war with Iran ultimately end when Tehran is weakened, or when Washington realizes that the price of continuing the war has become too high?